Part 63. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 622. Greet squatted outside the curtain silently, joining the healers who came first. Pastor Gavin, the eldest disciple of Elderwood, moved to the side and waved to him. How about it? Not good. Gretel was a little frustrated. She sat down next to him and lowered her head. They didn't let me see it. I didn't know where to place the chest piece when listening to the fetal heartbeat, so I couldn't do a B ultrasound, and there were still many tests that hadn't been done. The information he now knows allows him to determine the patient's condition. I can't do that. The healers looked at each other with a faint smile in their eyes, but it was difficult to show it due to the presence of the Earl. Pastor Gavin shook his head. There's nothing you can do about it. Treating people of noble status is like this. Come on, while they are busy, let's talk about this lady's situation. The healers talked to each other. Soon, Gretel knew that this lady was the Count's youngest daughter and his most beloved daughter. I am 21 years old this year. Unfortunately, I have not achieved much as a warrior or a spellcaster. In terms of physical fitness, I can only be regarded as an ordinary person. I had been married for 3 years and had been pregnant once before, but unfortunately I had a miscarriage. This pregnancy was not smooth from the beginning. Ms. Caroline started vomiting when she found out she was pregnant, and she has not gotten better until now. Occasionally there is bleeding. The amount is not large, but it is worthy of vigilance. As he spoke, the curtain opened and a maid walked out quickly holding a copper basin. Gretel glanced out of the corner of his eye, and he jumped up like a rabbit hit by an arrow, and rushed towards him. Wait. Give me a look. Pastor Gavin didn't even have time to stop him. Gretel had already rushed to the edge of the copper basin and squatted down. The maid turned pale with fright, squatted on the ground, subconsciously blocked the basin of blood with her body, and huddled up. Your Excellency. This is a lady's thing. You can't look at it? With this question and answer, everyone's eyes turned. Pastor Gavin leaned towards Greet, with a concerned look on his face, but it was difficult to stop or persuade him. The magician next to him stretched his neck, almost saying, I'm curious, I want to know what Greet is looking at written on his face. However, he was not as embarrassed as Greet when it came to a pot of women's filth, and was too embarrassed to look at it. Bishop Ares fiddled with the holy symbol on his chest and whispered something. Next to it, the priest of the spring water goddess subconsciously leaned back, as far away from Gretel as possible, trying hard to control his muscles not to show a disgusted expression. You should read this kind of stuff too. Too disgusting. The priests of the god of nature are really not particular. Oh, the magicians are not particular either, and the necromancers are especially not particular. They can play with any disgusting things. The Earl of Argyll cast a distant glance, slightly moved, but did not agree or stop him. In the silence, only Greet squatted in front of the maid, stopping her from leaving. I know. I just want to take a look to see if there is any abnormality in the dirt. If there is anything wrong, this is for diagnosis, not what you think. Put it down quickly and let me take a look. Show him. The Earl of Argyll finally spoke up. Others would ignore their filth and lower their status in order to treat their own daughters. Why should he hesitate? As if she had received an amnesty, the maid quickly put the copper basin on the ground. She didn't even have time to get up. She crawled back a few steps using her hands and feet, and retracted directly behind the curtain. Gretel no longer paid attention to her. He knelt on the ground, bowed his head deeply, and carefully moved the copper basin with his mage's hand, lifting a little from time to time to take a closer look. The more he looked, the more serious his face became. Finally, he stood up suddenly and quickly came to the Earl of Argyll. Your Excellency, please allow me to check the lady immediately. He looked directly at the Earl, his face serious. He said it was a request, but his tone was completely unquestionable. In this method of casting, you must use your hands to directly touch the skin of the abdomen without any obstructions. I can see without my eyes, and I can go in and out blindfolded dash. His tone was urgent and his body leaned forward slightly, unknowingly bringing out a bit of pleading. The Earl of Argyll stared at him deeply and his face became serious. Is it necessary? For the health of the young lady, Greet answered affirmatively. I just saw something bad and I have to confirm it. It's best if it's okay. If it goes as I expected, it will be very troublesome if we don't deal with it in time. What did you see? The Count's face became more solemn. Gretel turned to look at the copper basin, then looked at the Earl, with a hesitant look on his face. The great men of this world, counts, nobles, and high-ranking knights would pull him over and squat there to watch, but they wouldn't agree, right? After hesitating for a moment, he took out the secret eye ring and stimulated it with mental power. A ball of light the size of a cherry fluttered past, and in front of it, a screen of light spread out silently. The secret eye falls, rotates, and closes the distance. Gretel looked at the Count and saw that he showed no sign of disgust, so he pointed at the image on the light screen, adjusting the focus while explaining. Look, there are small clumps of bubble-like things in the blood. This shouldn't appear, I'm worried that there is something bad in her body. I need to use magic to take a look dash. Not far away, the healers on the sofa pricked up their ears to listen to him. Pastor Gavin stretched his neck hard to take a look into the copper basin, but before he could find the right angle, there was a plop sound from the side. The medical mage from the Magic Council leaned out too far and accidentally fell off the sofa. He climbed up slyly, secretly summoned a secret eye, and floated towards the copper basin. The Earl of Argyll stared at the light screen carefully, his brows furrowing tighter and tighter. After years of fighting, he has seen all kinds of blood, gurgling, gushing, spitting out, choking and coughing, and splattering all over the floor. He had seen bubbles of blood more than once. However, those are a mixture of blood, water, and air, and when the air dissipates, it will naturally disappear. But the one in front of me was different. Those bubbles were clearly made of flesh and blood. He turned to Gretel with a solemn expression. What's this? Not sure yet. Greet shook his head slightly and waved away the light curtain. In fact, he already had a guess in his mind, but I have to use my self-created spell to check it again before confirming it. The Earl didn't say a word and just opened the curtain and went inside. The low and deep voice rang for a while, then he turned around and called out to Gretel. You cast the spell. Gretel took a step forward and turned around quickly when he saw the frightened look on the lady's face. He reached into his pocket, looking for a silk scarf or something to cover his eyes, but before he could find it, he was pulled in. What's the fuss? Just watch. I let you in, so I didn't doubt you. Greet finally closed her eyes in front of the bed. Asking the maid to spread the whole bottle of glycerin evenly, he put his hand on the pregnant woman's abdomen and activated the B ultrasound spell. Immediately, his brows furrowed tightly. In the meditation field of vision, the feedback from the B ultrasound spell is a large area of dense echoes like falling snow. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 623. In front of the hospital bed, Gretel's expression became more and more solemn. He endured silence, closed his eyes and moved his fingertips, exploring other parts of his abdomen bit by bit. Uterus outline. Placenta. Amniotic cavity. Fetus. A 5-month-old fetus should already be 20 to 25 centimeters long, 16 centimeters long from crown to hip, and weigh about 320 grams. However, Greet looked left and right, and based on his experience of conducting ultrasound examinations on so many fetuses, he felt that this child was too small. Moreover, part of the uterus is fetal membranes and amniotic fluid, while the placenta, which is not a small part, has uneven and dense echoes. Judging from the image, the stars are dotted like falling snow. Hydatidiform mole. To be more precise, it is a partial mole. If it is a complete mole, there is no gestational sac in the uterus, or there is no fetal heartbeat. Then, the experienced healers who came before, relying on their induction, would directly say there is no breath of life. In partial hydatidiform mole, the fetus is still present. Even now, he is still alive, alive. Gretel lowered his hands sadly. He turned his back to the pregnant woman and looked at the Earl of Argyll. "Shall we go out and talk?" With this simple sentence, he clearly saw the clouds in Earl Argyll's eyes, which instantly deepened. The Earl didn't ask any questions, but leaned towards the hospital bed. Gretel heard a slight rustling sound, as if the father was pulling the blanket over his daughter and gently stroking her hair. "It's okay. Dad will go out and talk to the pastor. You have a good rest, don't worry, it will be fine." After a few words of comfort, he took Gretel with him and strode out of the inner room. Without stopping, he walked through the outer room and walked to the opposite window. After making sure that no one inside the curtain could hear anything, he turned to face Gretel and said in a deep voice, "Tell me, what's going on?" "The situation is very bad," Greet thought, organized his words, and explained carefully in words that people here can understand. "As you can see, there are some small bubbles in the blood discharged by Ms. Caroline. In fact, I saw many such bubbles in her uterus, accounting for a large part of the volume." He released Silent Phantom, sketched out the scene in the womb, pointed at the image in the sky and tried to explain. "If it is a normal pregnancy, inside the uterus, the fetus is wrapped in the amniotic cavity and filled with amniotic fluid. Outside the amniotic fluid is the uterine wall. But now, inside the uterine wall dash." He hooked his fingers, then hooked them again. With the movements of the fingertips, the Silent Phantom quietly changed, the amniotic cavity shrank, and there were many more blister-like entities between it and the palace wall. These things squeeze the amniotic cavity, suck nutrients away from the pregnant woman, and hinder the development of the fetus. In fact, it is almost impossible for a fetus with such symptoms to be kept to term. The Earl of Argyll listened in silence. When Gretel said "I've finished," he didn't say anything. He just stared at the phantom in the sky, clenching and unclenching his palms, and then clenching them again. One step away, Gretel heard a slight crackling sound from the knuckles of the great knight's fingers, and there was faint wind and thunder surging between his fingers. "Hey, just see a doctor. I don't want to hit anyone." Gretel subconsciously took a step back, reached into his breast pocket, and tightened his grip on the endless ink pen. After becoming an intermediate magician, he has been able to activate the force field barrier magic on his own. Of course, Gretel was still not sure whether the force field barrier could withstand a blow from a level 15 knight. Maybe, prepare the teleportation magic. Fortunately, the Earl of Argyll had no intention of throwing a punch. He restrained his emotions for a while, took a long breath, and nodded politely to Gretel. "Master Nordmark, thank you for your diagnosis. But you know, Caroline is my daughter after all, and it is very important. Could you please tell other healers about this situation? I would like to hear it. Their opinion." "Sure." Greet agreed without hesitation. For a consultation, it's normal to want to hear what the doctor you trust has to say. As long as you don't hit people or make trouble, anything will do. The healers gathered to hear him explain. After making a statement, Pastor Gavin rubbed the bark of the oak staff and nodded first. "I see, that makes sense. I do feel that this fetus is very weak, and I'm still thinking about how to protect it." The god of war priest said nothing, and neither did the priests of the spring temple. But the magician who fell off the sofa in order to see the secret vision asked another question. How do you confirm that the situation in the womb is like this? Do you rely on your magic? Can you teach it to me? I can buy a spell model, or exchange it with other spells. You can teach, but the problem is that without training, it is difficult to release the correct ultrasound immediately, and you cannot understand the ultrasound images. Gretel thought for a moment. How about this? Lord Earl, can you find a few pregnant women who are about the same month old, and I can make images of them, and then compare them and explain them to everyone. This is possible. The Earl of Argyll gave the order, and his servants went out in all directions, searching frantically in and around the house. In less than an hour, 3 pregnant women were found and neatly delivered to Gretel. The magician is responsible for providing energy, and Gretel is responsible for performing ultrasound examinations and making the golden box spit out chips. Then, excite several chips at the same time and adjust the image to the same angle. Look, in a normal pregnant woman, the signal displayed by the uterus is like this. But Ms. Caroline, part of her uterus displays the signal like this. Wow, it's still so difficult. I miss the 4-dimensional color Doppler ultrasound and the computer system that can directly reconstruct images. But for the spellcasters, and even for the Earl of Argyll himself, this difference is enough to explain the problem. His Excellency the Earl stared attentively for a while, closed his eyes forcefully, and turned to Gretel. So, can these blisters be removed using magic, or other methods? If they are all removed, will the fetus be able to grow well? This approach sounds feasible. Several healers were refreshed, and they got together to write, draw, and discuss in low voices. Greet shook his head slowly. I'm sorry, I don't think I can save this fetus. With every word he said, he watched helplessly as the anticipation in the Earl's eyes faded and the pain increased. However, partial mole is often accompanied by developmental delay or multiple malformations, and is rarely associated with full-term infants. Moreover, even if it is barely preserved, more than 90% of the fetal chromosome type is triploid. Triploidy means difficulty in meiosis to form gametes and often infertility. This means that Ms. Caroline's husband's bloodline will continue in this generation and will be discontinued in the next generation. Although I couldn't explain to the Count, or even everyone in the world, what chromosomes were and what triploidy was, there was no benefit in trying to survive the fetus. If this child stays in the mother's body any longer, the damage to the mother will only increase. My suggestion is to terminate the pregnancy immediately, remove the baby, and have the uterus thoroughly evacuated. But Caroline only has this one child, Earl of Argyll interrupted excitedly. Her husband is dead, and she and her husband can never have another child. In this case, don't you want to build another ward in your medical clinic? I will give you a building, please, help her keep that child. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Illness is truly a human misery. When I wrote The Fetus is Still Alive Today, it felt like a knife had been stabbed in my heart. I begged for comfort. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 624. One building. A VIP ward? The eyes of the spellcasters turned around. The Ares priest pursed his lips slightly, as if he wanted to say wow or whistle. They have been cooperating with the Earl of Argyll for a long time, and such a generous act is really rare to see. The magician smacked his tongue slightly, as if he wanted to admire the nobles are really rich. He had also heard about the cost of building Greet's hospital. It was not a small sum of money. To pay such a reward to a 6th level mage for a pregnant woman and a fetus, tisk tisk. The priest of the spring temple looked sideways for a moment, then lowered his head and said nothing, focusing on fiddling with his belt. Obviously, he was quite calm about the count's generosity. Greet really wants a VIP ward. With a fixed VIP ward, you can receive a large number of high-end patients. With more high-end patients, a large number of professionals' physical data will naturally be available. And high-end patients are generally wealthy enough. With more money, we can expand the project, train midwives on a large scale, and try to benefit more mothers. But the condition for getting this building is to keep the fetus? Greet pursed her lips and shook her head firmly. A gentleman loves money and gets it wisely. Some money cannot be earned if it cannot be earned. Why? You can't do it? The Earl of Argyll frowned slightly. He looked around at the casters around him. Those healers were obviously higher than Gretel in terms of age and spellcasting level. Perhaps, in terms of treatment, high-level healers are more reliable? But no matter what, it was Greet who gave a clear diagnosis and even presented irrefutable evidence. The Earl thought for a while, then tentatively faced Gretel and proposed an improvement plan. Or, if the amount of treatment is not enough, you will come up with a plan and let others help. Gretel still shook his head. There is no use in giving a plan. So far, he has not seen any magic that can operate on the genetic level. What's more, this fetus is very likely to be deformed. But he has no evidence. His B ultrasound magic level is not up to the level of 4-dimensional color ultrasound. It cannot output images in real time, let alone confirm the fetal internal organs, blood vessels and other internal conditions. Medical textbooks from past lives. That one can't even be taken out. He racked his brains, thinking about how to convince the other party. The Earl of Argyll was confused. Aren't they just those blisters? Isn't it enough to remove it? Oh, could it be that divine magic can't do it? He took a few steps toward the window, turned back, and took a few more steps. Standing in front of Gretel, his eyes were eager. Even if you can't do it with magic, Master Nordmark, I remember that you were able to cut open the mother's belly and take out the child, and the wound healed without leaving any trace afterwards. Then, you can also cut open the abdomen and remove those blisters. And then heal the uterus. Well, your idea is really unreasonable. Greet opened her mouth before she could answer, but the Earl of Argyll had already finished speaking. Even if it grows again later, let's do it again. Let's do our best to keep that child. Is it really not okay? This is your concept of intrauterine surgery. Gretel was impressed by the Count. However, he still shook his head firmly and without hesitation. Your Excellency, I am only a 6th level spellcaster. My knowledge of divine arts and magic is extremely limited. However, based on my knowledge, this fetus cannot be saved. It cannot be saved. He took a step back and bowed deeply. If you decide to let the young lady give up this child, I am willing to do my best. If you must keep it, I really have no choice. Those blisters will corrode the mother's body over time and are harmful to the mother's body. Please, Lord Earl, make decisions early. After speaking, he looked directly at the Count, took 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, and retreated steadily, using actions to strengthen his attitude. The Earl's face became increasingly gloomy. He stared at Gretel for a while, and then suddenly said, "What if I let others do it? Master Nordmark, are you willing to provide guidance?" Gretel froze. Providing guidance is tantamount to saying that it makes sense to do so. Can we not provide guidance? For novices, even a caesarean section is not that easy. A slip of the hand can really kill someone. What's more, obstetrics and gynecology clearly states, during the uterine evacuation process, if trophoblast cells enter the uterine sinus and cause pulmonary embolism, or even acute respiratory distress or acute right heart failure, cardiovascular and respiratory function support treatment must be provided in a timely manner. For safety reasons, it is recommended that those whose uterus is greater than 16 weeks of pregnancy or who have comorbidities should be transferred to a hospital with experience in treatment for uterine evacuation. Greet had no experience in obstetrics and gynecology. However, he believed that no one here, or even everyone in the world, knew intraoperative first aid better than him. To stick to principles? Or does it cost the patient's life? Gretel closed his eyes deeply. When he opened it again, his eyes were clear and unyielding. Sorry, Your Excellency, I still insist on my opinion. If you insist on having surgery, you can ask these people here, or any healer you trust, to learn the surgery method from me. He raised his hand and waved his arm across several high-level healers present, as well as the disciples and students they had brought in to beat him. Everyone has a share, no one is left out. I will definitely teach everything I have and will never hold anything back. However, I will not do it myself, nor will I agree to provide guidance. The Count's eyes followed his gesture. The medical magician was the first to retreat. I trust Greet's judgment. I didn't see the condition of the fetus, but he did. If he said it couldn't be saved, then it definitely couldn't be saved. Beside him, Pastor Gavin said nothing and also took a step back. The bishop of the God of War temple shrugged his shoulders and spread his hands, meaning don't look for me. I am a God of War priest, purely here to provide divine magic. I know nothing about women giving birth to children, and I am completely clueless. What should I do to learn about caesarean section? Earl Argyle's expectant eyes finally fell on the great priest of the Spring Temple. The high priest's dark blue silk robe fluttered slightly, and the narcissus petals on his belt were shining with golden light. He hesitated for a long time, and finally nodded almost invisible. The Earl of Argyle immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Then it's up to you. Master Nordmark, please teach him quickly. I'll pay for the learning fees. How much is needed? In gold coins, contribution points, or magic materials? Neither. Greet shook his head cautiously. He turned to the high priest and looked directly into his eyes. I will teach you the relevant knowledge about caesarean section in detail and without reservation. As the price of learning this knowledge, please use this method to save 20 poor mothers every year for free and at no cost. Life. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 625. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Gretel. The Earl of Argyle inhaled and exhaled heavily, his chest heaved and his breath shot out like an arrow. After a while, Gretel felt the wind in his ears gradually died down. What kind of lung capacity is this? You are the reincarnation of Bellows, right? I feel like Phelps' lung capacity is not as high as yours. Even if you are a high-level knight, your chest volume is always limited, right? The Earl was really shocked. However, it was not convenient to discuss remuneration with Gretel at this moment. He turned to the high priest and bowed his head solemnly. Please. The priest adjusted the corners of his robe and looked solemn. He clasped his hands in front of his chest, lowered his head slightly, and made a praying gesture. In the name of the goddess, I swear that after I learn caesarean delivery from Master Nordmark, I will save the lives of at least 20 poor mothers every year for free and without charge. If I violate the oath, may the goddess deprive me of my god technique. That's enough. Greet came up and shook hands with him. I salute you, High Priest Perry. If it's convenient, come back to the medical center with me, and I'll start teaching you right away. Well, saving 20 poor pregnant women, that doesn't mean just dragging 20 pregnant women for caesarean section will be regarded as saving lives. If it does not meet the indications for surgery and does not require a hard dissection, It certainly cannot be counted. The World Health Organization has set a warning line for caesarean section rate of 15%. Countries such as the United Kingdom and the United States are all below the warning line, and Japan is only 7%. Even if you calculate at 15% and perform caesarean section on 20 women who meet the surgical indications, you will have to provide prenatal check UPS to at least 133 women. If you want to be safer, collect enough money, maybe more. The plan goes through. Good. High Priest Perry thought he would be able to get started immediately. However, when he came to Greet's medical clinic, the first thing he did was to learn the surgical aseptic procedures, the second thing was to recite the entire obstetrics and gynecology. When will we learn about caesarean section? You have to start learning from the basics. If you don't start learning from the basics, you will get into big trouble. Of course, the Earl of Argyll's needs must be responded to, and the High Priest's self-confidence must be suppressed. The strongest way to suppress confidence is through practice. Gretel invited the High Priest and the knights sent by the Count to the research building and got into the operating room specialized in animal experiments. Come on, try giving the rabbit a caesarean section first. Rabbits can give birth to a litter of 6 to 10 babies in a month, and can give birth 4 to 6 times a year. Most of the animals raised in the research building are rabbits, which can be used as you like. The High Priest put on surgical clothes and picked up the scalpel. Fix the rabbit, take an anesthesia magic, and cut it with a knife. Hey, I'm bleeding. This knife was wrong, it must have cut a blood vessel. The High Priest quickly threw a healing spell to stop the bleeding. Having to stop the blood flow and prevent the wound from healing was a real test of control. Fortunately, High Priest Perry is also a high-level healer above level 10 and has rich experience. It seemed that he had completed it with ease, but only he knew that white hair was sweating all over his back. He calmed down and continued cutting. The tip of the knife penetrates, presses down, and gets stuck. High Priest Perry took a breath and pressed hard. Stop, 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 stop. I scratched the little rabbit. High Priest Perry was cutting, shearing, and throwing healing spells. After finally stopping the bleeding, I pulled out the little rabbit at the top and took a look. Unfortunately, he was stabbed in the neck, half of his cervical vertebrae was broken, and he could no longer survive. The knight next to him turned blue. A caesarean section sounds simple, just cut open, take the baby out, and heal with surgery. It's your first time working as a newbie, and look, this is what you'll end up with. High Priest Perry was so nervous that he was sweating all over. He wiped it with his backhand, and his face was covered with rabbit blood from his forehead to the corners of his eyes. He quickly called for water to wash his face, and the water splashed all over the dissecting table. Gretel, what about the sterile operating practices? How many articles have you violated so far? You must scold me severely when you look back. Swear hard. After a long time of tossing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, pulled out 8 little rabbits. One had its cervical vertebra cut off, one had its leg broken, and the other 2 looked miserable. As for the female rabbit, even with the support of divine magic, she was tortured to death. The knight inhaled, exhaled, inhaled again, exhaled again, took his leave, and quickly reported back to the Count. It seems that this caesarean section operation cannot be learned in a short time. If you take it by force, the life and health of the young lady will be really worrying. From then on, High Priest Perry began his miserable study career. Endorsing, just memorizing anatomy diagrams and obstetrics and gynecology took a full week. When it came time to actually get started, it was even more stumbling. Who asked you to bend down to pick up things? During the operation, your hands cannot go up to your shoulders and cannot go down to your waist. Get out. Brushing your hands again. Stop. Don't wipe the sweat with your hands. Call a nurse to help you wipe it, or use a spell. Don't contaminate your hands. Get out. Brush your hands again. Stop. Don't pollute the operating table with your sweat. Get out. Going out, just for dissecting rabbits, the great priest received countless reprimands. Every time you make a mistake, you must stop immediately, go out to change clothes, wash your hands again, and come in again. It goes without saying how far the study progress has been delayed. Gretel's heart was as solid as stone, and she remained unmoved. Every medical student is scolded for their sterile operating habits. I was scolded by teachers, scolded by other doctors, scolded by head nurses, scolded by nurses. After working hard for several months, I was finally able to go into the operating room and help pull the hook. If I made a mistake, I was kicked out immediately. Don't even think about getting started again in a month or two. How can it be as good as now? Go out, change clothes, wash your hands, and then come back and continue working? I haven't hit anyone with a hemostat yet. Oh, I forgot, here are all replaced by mage's hands, there are no hemostats. In addition to a septic operation, practical skills are also an issue. Just for cutting the skin, the great priest was chanted dozens of times by Gretel. The thumb is under the handle of the knife, and the index finger and middle finger are on the handle. Use wrist strength. Don't rely on your fingers to exert force. Just hold the handle of the knife with your fingers and keep it stable. The tip of the knife points downwards at 45 degrees, penetrates 1 millimeter, then flattens the blade and cuts. Don't keep cutting at an angle, as it will injure the deep tissue. Don't swing the knife. Don't swing it from side to side. You don't need to cut an arc for a cesarean section, just walk straight. How long does it take to learn this before you can master it independently? High Priest Perry doubted himself. Pastor Joanna, who studied with him but at a different pace, secretly expressed her deep sympathy. Not counting the theoretical courses, she has been studying for a month or two, and she has only been watching, doing tricks, and throwing healing techniques, and has never even opened a stage independently. Nearly a month later, Ms. Caroline finally miscarried. She struggled to glance at the child and immediately fainted. The child has only one arm but 3 legs. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Yesterday, there were only 108 recommendation votes, a new low, and I was heartbroken. Some people say that I only have 2,000 words a day. How can I have 2,000 words? Obviously there are 4,000 words every day. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 626. The VIP ward that Greet wanted just flew away with wings. Although the Earl of Argyll was very impressed by him and very grateful for his treatment suggestions, it was impossible to give him much more than the normal reward for this. In fact, the Earl of Argyll donated 1,000 gold coins to the medical clinic only in the name of his daughter. In theory, it allows more poor people, especially poor mothers, to receive medical services. Not too much, not too little, just average. Only poor High Priest Perry was caught in a dilemma. After studying hard for a month, before I could even enter the operating room to observe, the person I was supposed to serve had a miscarriage. She had a miscarriage. Do you still want to continue studying? Greet asked with a smile. High Priest Perry gritted his teeth and nodded vigorously. Study. You have all learned this, and the hardships ahead cannot be in vain. Besides, if you don't have to worry about many arts, there are a lot of opportunities to serve the nobles in the spring water temple. In case of difficult childbirth, this skill can be life-saving. If others can't, but you can excel and take the lead. No matter what, it's better than my own family can't handle it, so go next door and ask the magician for help. Not only did he learn it by himself, but he also went to Gretel with a shy face. "Mage Nordmark, I have two disciples. Can you call me over to help me? One is level 5 and the other is level 6. They can both help and will never cause any trouble for you. They are all spellcasters around 40 years old. At this age and this level of spell casting, it is already difficult to take a step forward, and it is not easy to host the temple independently. Both of them were from minor noble families, and without family support, they either had to go to a small remote place to preside over a temple, or they could only live in a small corner of the large temple in Nevis and beg for food from others. Okay, Greet smiled, not embarrassed at all. I only have two conditions dash. You say. Let them work in the medical center for 2 years in vain. Well, when I was an apprentice, I worked for nothing. This is something that is beyond the conditions and is a matter of course. Gretel stretched out his palm and bent his fingers one by one. First, if they want to learn cesarean section surgery, they must be like you and commit to saving 20 poor mothers every year. This is not difficult, I agreed for them. High Priest Perry immediately patted his chest without thinking. In the past few days, he had also seen that Greet performed cesarean sections at a rate of 1 per half an hour, 1 per half an hour. Even if the speed is twice as slow as him, 3 days is enough to handle 20 people. What does it mean to spend 3 days a year doing charity? Even if their spring water temple mainly serves the nobles, they still have to do some charity for the common people occasionally. What about the second one? He asked anxiously. Gretel smiled. Second, I'm asking for your help to find a group of midwives for nobles and wealthy people to receive training. It doesn't need to be many, just 10 to 20. I can't fit any more here. The first batch of midwives have been trained almost completely and can basically be released for use. The next step is to expand influence from top to bottom. After getting through the top management, you can collect everything in one network. At that time, he can go to the City Hall and the Magic Council and talk confidently. For the health of mothers and newborns, all midwives in the city should receive training. At the same time, publicity will be spread to let all pregnant women who cannot give birth know where to go for cesarean section. Well, of course, it would be even better if you can get administrative subsidies by the way. Even if you can't do that, you can still get more donations, right? Is that okay? He looked at High Priest Perry eagerly. High Priest Perry lowered his head and pondered, then smiled bitterly. Let me try. Midwives for nobles and wealthy people are not just available. Although these people are considered to be in the middle and lower classes, they have little wealth and little prestige. More importantly, they all have backgrounds and know where to catch up with the big shots. What's more important is that these are often received by wealthy families 3 days, a week, or even a month or 2 in advance, and they pay close attention to the situation of their female relatives. Too many were taken away at once, and many big shots will protest. He thought for a while, asked for a pile of information from Gretel, and went back to find the chief priest of the main temple of Nevis, the high priest of Moria. This is the condition put forward by Master Nordmark. I think it is also good for us to let the midwives learn these things. At least fewer people will die, can you? High Priest Moria stroked his beard and pondered slightly. This old man's spellcasting level is as high as level 17. He is 112 years old this year and has been in charge of the main temple for more than 30 years. Over the past 100 years, we have witnessed countless ups and downs. He has seen all kinds of healers, those who are dedicated to climbing the ladder, those who are immersed in the study of magical arts, and those who are dedicated to treating illnesses and saving lives. In his eyes, this Nordmark mage was someone who wholeheartedly treated illnesses and saved people. He was quiet and harmless, and even worthy of his appreciation. Promoting public health, establishing infectious disease hospitals, promoting cowpox vaccination, one after another, when the little mage defended the poor, the light shining on him was so bright that it could illuminate the entire city. Now, the Nordmark mage wants to recruit midwives to study. Although this request is a bit strange, it is not too outrageous. However, as the High Priest of Moria is in a high position, he has to think further. Invite all the midwives who cater to the nobility for training. After the training, if the midwives encounter any problems that cannot be solved, won't they recommend others to him? There are already signs. Viscount Calendar and Earl of Argyll, whenever something happened at home, they would ask Master Nordmark to take a look. And if things continue like this, Your Excellency, Chief Priest, this technique of Master Nordmark is really useful in saving the lives of pregnant women. High Priest Perry hurriedly handed over a stack of information. This is the record of pregnant women treated in the medical center after they started the midwife training program. In 2 months, 200 pregnant women, not a single one died. Oh! Priest Moria was slightly moved. He was not very clear about the average maternal mortality rate, but in his impression, it was normal for 2 or 3 deaths out of 100. Even if the mother is pampered and has magical support, it is not surprising that 1 in 100 will die. Furthermore, the mother's pain will be much less if she takes a baby by cesarean section, and she doesn't have to struggle for days and nights. Priest, we must learn this technique. Devout believers of the goddess should receive such care. In other words, devout believers who can afford to donate money can afford the magical cost of cesarean section, and such services should be provided to them. Let me think about it first. Priest Moria thought for a moment, then simply left this record and dismissed Perry. He carefully turned over the form from beginning to end, and then from end to end, and finally picked up the bell and shook it quickly. Go and ask Aunt Salia to come. I have something to discuss with her. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 627. Aunt Thalia quickly answered the call. This nun is the leader of all female priests in the great temple of Nevis. He is over 70 years old, and his spellcasting level is as high as level 12. Because he has been immersed in the grace of the goddess, he looks like a 50-year-old man, with strands of silver on his temples that are not completely white yet. She took the information from the chief priest with her thin fingers and read 10 lines at a glance. After reading it once, and then again, the wrinkles on my face became deeper and deeper, and my expression was stern, even faintly sad. 2 months, 200 people, no one died? Is it reliable? It should be reliable. Priest Moria nodded cautiously. Perry has been at Oak Grove Medical Center for almost a month. As far as he knows, he has not seen any maternal deaths. Moreover, I have also paid attention to this Nordmark mage. I have never heard of any fraud in the papers he published before. Thing. You mean the one about heart surgery? Aunt Salia took a deep breath. In the past, there were a huge number of bacterial-related and infectious disease-related cases, and she did not verify them one by one. However, heart surgery attracted much attention, and she found out the addresses of all 10 cases through connections and visited them one by one. Each one of them really existed and lived 1 month later. In Bida's query system, you can even find the angiography images of each case, including heart beating, blood flow, and clear comparisons before and after. Thalia, in the name of the goddess, I want to ask you a question. Over the years, what is the approximate mortality rate of mothers who have given birth under the care of our temple? Salia's face immediately became heavy. In the goddess's teachings, protecting the family and taking care of women and children are very important responsibilities, and most of the female priests in the temple are doing this. From the little girl who entered the temple for training to the leader of the female priests of the great temple, she has cared for more than 100 mothers and delivered babies. The screams, pain, and death are all vivid in my mind without the need to recall them. At least 1%, she murmured. Even if the most experienced priestess with intermediate magical skills delivers the baby, at least 1 out of 100 women will die. Except for a few professionals, most of the aristocratic women who are qualified to be delivered by the priestess are physically weak. Unlike peasant women and poor women who often still do physical labor until the day before giving birth, many aristocratic women do not even have the physical strength to survive the long delivery process. Among them, the physical support that low-level magic can provide is extremely limited. Priestesses who are above level 5 and still working in temples are even rarer than male priests who are above level 10. Most of the female priestesses in the Spring Temple are aristocratic women. They begin to receive education at the age of 7 or 8, and formally study divine arts in their teens. Often after advancing to the first or second level, they go home and get married. In fact, many female priests obtain magical ranks just to add a beautiful dowry to themselves. Once you get married and your goal is achieved, the things you have studied so hard can naturally be put away. Even if a few ambitious priestesses don't want to give up, having children, nurturing babies, and taking care of housework can consume their last bit of energy and pull them away from the career dedicated to the goddess. For this reason, after many years of running in with the nobles, the Spring Water Temple gradually formed a tacit understanding. Accept donations, recruit some noble girls, provide education and training, let them marry as trainee priests and low-level priests, and at the same time build relationships with nobles. Recruit some young girls with outstanding talents from poor backgrounds, requiring them to remain unmarried for life and to serve the goddess devoutly. At the same time, they are given opportunities so that they can have more opportunities to improve in divine arts. However, in the initial stage, aristocratic girls who have received family education since childhood and have family support always have a better foundation and learn faster. She pulled back her thoughts, shook her head sadly, and began to slowly read through the records again. 1, 2, 3, 199, 200. 200 women giving birth. Prenatal care, blood tests, preparation for blood transfusions. About 80% of births are natural under the guidance of midwives. About 20% are converted to cesarean section due to early cesarean section, or if things go wrong during normal delivery. No one died. It would be great if we knew this. She lowered her head and murmured. If we had, teacher, she wouldn't be. Her teacher, Aunt Claire, was invited to deliver the baby of a duchess. The childbirth was not smooth, 1 body and 2 lives were killed, and the furious duke beat him to death on the spot. That tragedy caused great shock. The priestesses gathered in front of the statue and prayed day and night without sleep. The twinkling candlelight never went out for 7 days and 7 nights. Finally, the chief priest personally took action and gathered high-ranking priests from several nearby temples to put pressure on the duke. The event ended with the duke, clothed in sackcloth, walking barefoot from the entrance to the temple square into the main hall and performing sacramental penance before the goddess. Naturally, donating a large amount of compensation is also indispensable. However, the deceased cannot come back after all. After being sold to the temple by her parents, Sister Salia, who was still young at the time, became an orphan once again. Can we learn this technique? Sister Salia raised her head from the file and looked at the chief priest expectantly. The chief priest sighed and tapped his fingers on the table unconsciously, round after round, round after round. You can learn it, and the Nordmark mage didn't prohibit others from learning it. But Salia. He turned to the last page of the record book. On the summary form, the number of maternal deaths, 0, was extremely shocking. The chief priest stared at the line of words, as if the huge 0 character would suddenly fly out of the paper and bite him. Bacteria. Plague. Purifying water sources. Up to now, it's also the technology of delivering babies. In the future, will a magician have the final say in fields related to the goddess? But the mortality rate doesn't lie, Sister Salia said urgently. How many mothers have died under the care of our temple, and how many have died under the care of Oak Grove? Anyone who is interested will know once they check, this cannot be deceived. Yes. Priest Moria sighed deeply. The domain of the Ares temple is warriors, battles, and wars. They have no interest in learning caesarean section techniques, and they have no clients. Deism mainly serves poor people and does not constitute direct competition with them. Only the magicians have always been in competition with them. Grab resources, grab magic materials, grab connections, and grab students. Now, do you want to snatch even the right to speak within the scope of the goddess's priesthood? We send people to learn from him, that would be equivalent to admitting that he created this technology and he has the final say. From now on, in terms of maternal delivery, our temple will always be lower than him. With this head down, it would be difficult to lift it up again. But if we don't learn, no one will come to us in the future. Children born by caesarean section, under the care of divine magic, will recover very quickly and without any pain. The nobles and magicians who can afford it will only rush to grab the surgery slot, and will never endure the long and painful natural childbirth again. The chief priest began to knead his eyebrows. If this is an unknown little guy, either he can be recruited into the temple with a huge profit, or he can be suppressed secretly so that he cannot make his voice heard, or he can be killed quietly without disturbing anyone. In history, the Spring Temple has done all the roads. But not this Nordmark mage. In terms of faith, he is a believer in the God of nature, and he seems to be a devout believer. In terms of background, his teacher is a legendary mage, who is much stronger than himself. Legend is angry, and no one here in the great temple of Nevis can catch it. In terms of channels, this guy has published an article on Arcana and an article on magic this year alone. As for journals such as Ordinary Magician's Monthly, publishing articles is simply a casual matter, and you don't even need to use the teacher's power. Otherwise, let's send more people to learn from him. Grandma Salia lowered her head and thought for a moment, and quickly made up her mind. Techniques need to be learned, and the interests of the temple must also be taken into consideration. There are ways to get the best of both worlds. If necessary, all the female priests I have here can be sent over. Once you learn how to do it, spread it out on a large scale immediately. By then, the Spring Water Temple will have sufficient manpower, high level of spell casting, and wide connections. As long as most of the nobility turn to them, who created the technology of caesarean section, so what? There is nothing wrong with letting a false reputation gain benefits. Even if they lower their heads, female priests are already a weak force in the Spring Temple. It doesn't matter if you bow your head to others a little more. Besides, even if we only need to save one more pregnant woman. Even if only one of the female priestesses who took this path could be beaten to death by their family members, and one less person could not bear the blow and changed careers due to the death of the person being cared for, that would be good. She raised her head, her eyes burning. I can even lead the team myself. 3 months, half a year, or even a year is not a particularly long time for us. For the glory of the goddess, it is only a moment. High Priest Moria lowered his head and pondered. Divine arts, magic, power, financial resources, temples, and beliefs were all flipping back and forth in his heart. Finally, he stood up. Let me think about it first. If necessary, go to the oak forest to see for yourself and see how that kid does it. If this skill is really strong, if it is really worth learning, and you must learn from him himself. Aunt Salia curtsied and left silently. Soon, she called a carriage and took her beloved female disciple straight to the Oak Grove Medical Clinic. Seeing is believing. I want to see for myself how powerful this technology is. The Spring Temple and the Oak Grove Medical Clinic are almost at opposite ends of the city, one is in the core of the aristocratic area, and the other is on the edge of the slum area. The carriage rolled, and after walking for a long time, I saw a sparse landscape ahead, with newly planted oak trees swaying outside the wall. Starting from the woods, a long line of carriages almost blocked the street in front of the hospital. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Today I collected another 10,000 rewards, so I can add more. Thanks to @Osman_Y for the reward of 600 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 628. Aunt Salia tried her best to look out through the car window. 1 carriage, 2 carriages, 3 carriages. The road that could accommodate 4 carriages running parallel was blocked by carriages that came from nowhere. And they are all dark carriages. The walls of the car are either painted black, or hung with black gauze, or even worse, covered with a layer of black cloth. Beside the carriage, 2 rows of men in black look solemn, walking forward slowly, covering their faces and crying loudly. There were also 2 large carriages, surrounded by fences and without roofs, carrying a band playing music. Tuba, trumpet, French horn, bagpipe, cello, viola. The music is so touching and pathos that if you stand nearby and listen to it for half a minute, your nose will feel sore. What's happening here? Grandma Salia tried her best to recall the surrounding map and confirmed that except for the Oak Grove Medical Clinic, there was nothing noteworthy nearby. Those slums and small workshops obviously cannot afford to hire such a horse-drawn carriage team. Even if someone dies, at most a few idlers are found, or a broken truck carries the coffin, and 2 people follow behind on foot to cry. This is the ultimate funeral scene among the poor. So is Oak Grove Medical Clinic in trouble? In this display, is it because someone was treated to death in the medical center and their family members came to make trouble? Aunt Thalia coughed, and the 2 knights guarding the carriage immediately urged their horses forward, shouting to get out of the way. The black carriage in front obviously didn't want to go against the temple, so it reluctantly squeezed to the side to make way. The light carriage with the daffodil emblem hanging on it moved forward quickly. Not long after, the Red Cross flag with a white background on the roof of the small building on the street was fluttering in the air, coming into view clearly. A little further forward, at the entrance of the small building, barbarian guards lined up, surrounding a young spellcaster. He was wearing a strange white robe, with a double placket and single-breasted buttons, and a large pocket on the lower left, lower right, and left chest. Whose robe is like this? Aunt Salia searched her memory, but couldn't find anything. Magicians either wear round-neck robes or fashionable clothes such as tuxedos. None of the 8 major factions have this style. Observing carefully, the spellcaster was only wearing a V-neck dark green singlet under the white robe. The texture is rough, the cut is hard to describe, and the aesthetic, it doesn't cinch the waist, doesn't outline the figure, it's just a pocket. Even so, it did not affect his status here. Behind the security guards, a dozen spellcasters stood in 2 rows according to their rank. Everyone was wearing those weird white robes, and half of them even had the same style of singlet. It looks like a medical clinic uniform. Aunt Thalia thought to herself. Although the barbarian guards at the entrance of the building were lined up, they did not look like they were facing a formidable enemy. When they saw the carriage coming, there were people who came to guide them. The reason is that opposite the flow of black carriages, there is a magnificent carriage parked majestically. In front of the carriage, 2 female magicians flushed with anger, pointing at the opposite side and cursing. If you are narrow-minded, go back and die. Don't cause trouble to others. Don't bother the healers. I delivered your wife's baby and even found something wrong with her. At hashtag $%U0026. So is it because of the delivery? Aunt Thalia nodded politely to the barbarian guard and helped the student out of the car. She hid behind the barbarian and watched curiously. The quarrel ahead was still going on, but the man's relatives couldn't stand it, so they simply directed the band and turned up the volume. Woo woo woo. Buzz buzz. Bang. 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 Gretel sighed helplessly. Medical trouble, because people who have died come to the doctor's house to make trouble. Forget it, as a doctor, there is nothing to say. Because the male doctor performed a caesarean section on the mother, the husband couldn't quarrel with his wife's family. He was in a depressed mood. He had a problem and died while meditating. The man's family members came to the doctor to make trouble. This. Besides, your medical troubles are unprofessional. There were no portraits, no wreaths, no large numbers of people wearing sackcloth and mourning, burning paper money at the entrance of the hospital. There were no banners, no placards, no loudspeakers with recordings playing on loop, and no one even pulled passers-by around and told everyone they met. There is a band, let's see what instruments they have. Wood pipe? Copper pipe? Cello. You should have two suanas. Gretel didn't feel nervous at all. Using physical combat power, barbarians are enough. Using magic, level 3 spells can also calm the scene. More advanced? Come on, the 3rd level fireball spell can already determine victory in a small-scale war. If it is a higher level destructive spell, the Parliament's law enforcement team will be dispatched. There was no sense of tension, and on the premise that he would not be beaten, he stood with his hands folded under the protection of the barbarians and just watched the show. Well, there is no medical department, there is no higher level competent department, and there will be no pressure to apologize to the patient's family regardless of reason. If you don't get understanding, your salary will be deducted, your performance will be deducted, the operation will be suspended or even dismissed. The medical career is perfect medical care. Career. Who allowed her to be delivered by a man? Who allowed it? On the other side of the black carriage, several men were still yelling. Feeling that I couldn't shout, I even added a loudspeaker magic to myself, and then continued to shout. How many times has Remy told her? No. Just no. What woman doesn't feel pain when giving birth? She is delicate, but she insists on having her own way. If she has to let other men touch her, can she not live without a man? Bah! Shameless. It doesn't hurt to stand and talk, the woman's relatives yelled back even louder. It doesn't hurt to give birth to a child. If you have the ability, you should also feel the pain. If you can't conceive and give birth to a child, you can go and endure the torture technique for 12 hours. You don't even feel sorry for your own wife, you scum. Aunt Salia listened for a while before she understood what was going on. The woman insisted on having a caesarean section and did not hesitate to let a man deliver the baby. The man didn't want his wife to be touched by another man and had a big quarrel. I don't know whether it was because the woman was strong enough or the woman's family was powerful enough, but he didn't stop her anyway. I felt aggrieved thinking about it. I had an accident while meditating and died. The man's family couldn't bear it and went to the medical center to make trouble. The woman's family members found out that the healer had been implicated, and rushed over to the rescue. Under the amplification technology, the voices of the two sides arguing were heard several streets away. After all, the woman was alone and could not quarrel with dozens of throats. In anger, she simply used offensive spells. Sonic burst. Loud and sudden, like thunder. The sound wave pushed straight forward, the crowd shut up, and the instruments were silent. The horses pulling the cart neighed in pain, foamed at the mouth, and staggered around. Gretel! Don't make any noise. Don't disturb my patients. Go back, comfort the patients, and see if anyone has arrhythmia or other complications." The latter sentence was shouted at the healers who were watching the fun. The white-robed spellcasters responded in unison, turned around and left. However, this shouting attracted the attention of the man's family members, who turned around and bombarded them. "You! It's you! It's you who killed my son! If you hadn't come up with this method of delivering the baby, my son and daughter-in-law wouldn't have quarreled, and nothing would have happened to my son. Brother, he died accidentally on his own, it has nothing to do with me. It's not like he jumped off the building in my hospital, and ended up asking my hospital to pay for it." Gretel sighed. He waved to the barbarian security guards on both sides. "It's all over, let's go back to work. Close the door and let them continue to make noise for any time. If they make any more noise, go out the back door and call the police. Oh no, go find the law enforcement team to come over to work." As he spoke, he scraped his heels against the ground and stepped back. The security guards surrounded him and retreated like water, as if being sucked into the hospital by a whirlpool. Grandma Salia followed the crowd silently and was dragged into the hospital together. She smiled secretly. It is true that male healers are prone to various problems when delivering babies. The man's criticism, the mother's own resistance, these can all be avoided with the intervention of the priestess of the Spring Temple. There is still quite a lot of room for cooperation between the two parties. After the matter is settled, she will talk to this Nordmark mage. The last person entered the hospital, grabbed the two doors, and quickly closed them. Through the crack in the door, the woman's relatives waved to greet and smiled apologetically. It's different on the man's side. Don't dare to rush up the steps and smash them, don't dare to cast spells to smash doors, smash other people's property. The mage has full power to fight back. He can even throw a fireball on the spot. However, they can shout loudly and openly insult. "Why did you do such a thing? Why did you deliver the baby to my daughter-in-law? Why did she let you touch her? Have you known each other for a long time and had an affair for a long time? Otherwise, a strange man dash." The voice was drowned in the louder yelling from the other side. Greed paused, pulled Bernard, who was staring fiercely outside, almost rushing out, and spoke softly. "Wait a minute. What the hell? Even if you scold me, why bother with my patient? If this is not explained clearly, all the mothers who come to me to give birth in the future will be slandered." He passed Bernard and hurried out of the door. He stood at the door, cast a loudspeaker on himself, and shouted angrily. "I have never seen her before. It was the first time she came to the medical center to seek medical treatment, and I only met her. She stayed in the medical center for 5 days in total. Every time we met, there was a female healer or midwife beside her. He has already behaved himself. When a male healer examines and treats members of the opposite sex, no matter what the situation, a third party must be present. Either a female nurse or a female healer, or a midwife, a patient's family member. If you have doubts, he can always find a pile of evidence. The hospital's regulations and the reputation of doctors and patients cannot be harmed." Gretel clenched his fists, ready for a confrontation at any time. However, the father who lost his son slowly turned to him, staring with 2 red eyes, and his voice trembled. "Then why do you want to deliver babies? You are just lustful and want to satisfy your own ulterior desires, so you came up with this method. You are so embarrassed to see and touch the bodies of so many pregnant women. Be proud." Greet's face instantly darkened. "If you say something like this, then only the Parliament Tribunal will see you. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 629. The case of Master Greet Nordmark against Master Herbert Bradley for infringement of reputation rights was to be heard in 3 days. Greet went to the Tower of Babel with confidence. For lawsuits between low-level mages, a small number of them go to the City Hall, and most of them go to the White Tower. As for mid-level mages, since most of the mages who can get to the middle level have high-level backers, any matter will be resolved in the Tower of Babel. This is the closest place to the high-level mages. If you want to find the backstage, you can just find them all at once. Greet did not go backstage. The doctor's office was blocked on Tuesday, and the court session was on Friday, so he missed the Thunder Lord's weekly meeting. As for going all the way to tell the teacher about such a trivial matter? Haha, not worth it. Anyway, as a disciple of the Lord of Thunder, as long as you do things openly and with a clear conscience. We don't bully others, but we are definitely not afraid of anyone bullying us. When he entered the court was bustling with people, and more than half of the people were already sitting there. The layout of the entire tribunal looks a bit similar to the theater, lecture hall, and even the surgery hall in Black Crow Swamp. At the end of the hall, facing the main entrance, is naturally the judge's bench. On the long table a little lower than the judge's bench, 4 clerks faced the judge and turned their backs to the audience, and they were in a record-keeping posture. Behind the judge, there was a specially enclosed railing. In a position similar to a box, there were more than one magician leaning on the railing to look around. I don't know if these people were observers or jurors, but when they saw him coming in, many people waved in a friendly way. On the left and right sides of the judge's bench, the plaintiff's bench and the defendant's bench are opposite each other. Taking into account the high cost of land in the Tower of Babel, the first row of seats for both parties almost reached the edge of the judge's bench. As for the auditorium, they are piled up layer by layer from opposite the judge's bench, just like the seats in a theater. At this time, the attendance rate in the auditorium has exceeded 80%. The seats are colorful and fragrant, and half of them are female mages. Of course. In the past 3 days, Greet sent at least 20 letters according to the patient list, asking patients or their family members who had been treated here to testify in court. As long as 2 people from each mother's home come, the auditorium of 200 people will be 20% full. If you also had a prenatal checkup at his place and made an appointment to give birth at his place, but were informed that there would be a lawsuit in the near future, and they would not accept any surgery except emergency surgery. Amen. In addition to the mother's family members, there are also a group of female mages from the Charm Control Department, Ying Ying and Yan Yan, who came together. The painless delivery through cesarean section was spread from the Charm Control Department. There was also a group of necromancers who came to watch the fun. If there weren't enough seats in the auditorium, they could fill the seats with skeletons. Of course, there are also the disciples and grandsons of the Lord of Thunder, mages of the energy-shaping system. Anyone who can put down their work will also invite their friends and swarm over. There is also the prophecy department. Oh, the prophecy department should not be called by him. In my impression, the defendant family has a prophecy department archmage, who should be from their side. Compared to Gretel, the defendant's mood was not so wonderful. When Master Herbert Bradley sat in the dock, his face was clouded, and it was like a thunderstorm would pour down in a minute. This Nordmark mage has gone too far. As a man, you have to do something as dirty as delivering a baby, look directly at, and even touch a woman's private parts. He actually dared to sue him for doing such a shameless thing, and even dared to go to the parliamentary tribunal. What's even more annoying is that in the past 3 days, more than one friend has come to persuade him. Apologize, make amends, and don't go to the tribunal. The Lord of Thunder knows that you bully his disciples, and he doesn't even need to step forward. Just a few older disciples under his command can kill your family smashed. Are legendary disciples great? Even if he does something like this, the Lord of Thunder can support him. Their family also has, well, There are really no legends in their family. There is a level 15 archmage, but the blood relationship is a bit distant. He is his great uncle and his grandfather's cousin. Although there are not many magicians in the family, their family can be considered worthy of speaking in front of the great mage, but with this relationship, they will never be able to withstand a legend. No. Absolutely not. Wizard Bradley punched the table with red eyes. His son was dead. The only son he had worked so hard to obtain. He became a level 1 mage at the age of 11 and was promoted to level 4 at the age of 15. He had always been the hope of the family. He died like this. Died. It's all that Nordmark mage's fault. Doing this kind of thing caused discord in their family, and their son and daughter-in-law quarreled. The daughter-in-law took the child to seek refuge with her friends in anger, and the son lost control of his mind and died while meditating in anger. He has no hope in this life. Even if he fights to the death and loses his life, he still has to expose the true face of the Nordmark mage. When in the center of the judge's bench, the presiding judge, wearing a black robe and a scale badge on his chest, rang the bell to announce the start of the trial. The small copper bell sounded like thunder, and an inexplicable wave emitted, instantly quelling the noise in the auditorium. It's obviously an alchemy tool, and tapping it with a mallet is just a ritual to activate magic. The case of Master Greet Nordmark against Master Herbert Bradley for infringement of reputation rights is now open. Please speak to the plaintiff. Gretel stood up and saluted the judge. There is no lawyer, and it is impossible to have one. The Court of Magicians does not need those fancy gadgets. He has to collect evidence, organize opinions, and invite witnesses, all by himself. 3 days ago, Master Herbert Bradley led the funeral procession and made a lot of noise in front of my medical clinic. He accused me of being lustful and wanting to satisfy my own ulterior desires before I started delivering babies. Business. He stated the facts calmly, completely turning a blind eye to the surprise, noise, indignation, and comments in the auditorium. Such remarks are a great insult to my reputation, as well as to the reputation of the women who received treatment at my medical center and gave birth safely, and to their families. For this reason, I have to appeal to the Parliament, asking Master Bradley to restore my honor. Mage Nordmark, do you have any evidence? In addition to the spellcasters and staff in the medical clinic, there were also Mage Isabel Gaddy, Mage Grace Tyson, and Sister Salia who was visiting from the Spring Water Temple. Greet came prepared and had already invited witnesses to the scene. Turning back and raising their hands slightly, the 2 magicians and a priestess bowed at the same time and nodded to the judge. Yes, we were all present and witnessed everything with our own eyes. During the questions and answers, the door of the tribunal was quietly opened a crack, and a silver-haired girl quietly entered the room and found an inconspicuous seat to sit down. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 630. Of the 3 witnesses, 2 are relatives and friends of the mother, and 1 is a completely independent third party with no connection of interest. Under the supervision of Detect Lies, the 2 female magicians each stated the situation at that time. As a clergyman, Sister Salia was exempted from the magic incarnation. Instead, she swore an oath in the name of faith to ensure that everything she said was true. The testimony was perfect. Greet thanked them. Then he turned to the judge, bowed slightly, and continued. Because delivery care must come into contact with female patients' bodies, Oak Grove Medical Office has always been very cautious in this regard. He reached out and touched the space bag, pouring out a pile of record books. Thick and thin, old and new, spread all over the table. From the beginning, we have formulated relevant rules. Male therapists are not allowed to examine female private parts alone. They must be accompanied by the patient's family members or female nurses. He reached out and took out a booklet. This is the code of conduct for medical staff in the hospital. The relevant regulations are in Chapter 3, Article 15. The judge nodded slightly. As soon as he raised his hand, the booklet with the red cross mark on the white background floated up on its own and flew towards his desk. The judge pushed up his glasses, flipped through the pages, then lifted them up again. The booklet floated in the air, turned around, and floated towards the box behind the judge. It seems that most of the gentlemen in the box are jurors. Alas, being a judge in the Tower of Babel is really not possible without good magic. Gretel sighed silently. The invisible servant just commanded it smoothly and without any fuss. It's probably still early for him to command his invisible servants to such an extent that they can act as equipment nurses at any time. He recovered his mind and took out the second stack of albums. Mothers who come to Oak Grove Medical Center to give birth have communicated with us before admission. The mother and her family agree that the therapist will only observe and touch the mother's body for medical purposes. This is a signed form before admission. Everybody has it? Another stack of books floated over. In the jury box and the auditorium, there was a buzz of discussion. You have already signed and agreed, and now you are causing trouble and slandering the healer. This is what you are doing wrong. As a noble magician, how could he go back on his word? Master Bradley's face darkened again. He slammed the table and said angrily, "My son didn't agree. Who knows who you asked to sign?" Boom. The judge raised his gavel and struck the bell. "Defendant, please be silent. It's time for the plaintiff to speak." "Ahem, wait until I finish." Without even looking at the old man with red eyes, Gretel took pictures of the third and fourth stacks of evidence. When examining pregnant women, more than 2 people are present at any time. This is the examination record for the past 2 months. You can see that each examination has the signatures of 2 people. There is a separate operation notice for cesarean section, signed. This is the operation record. At least 2 people are present, and there is at least 1 female therapist or midwife or nurse. Stacks of books were carried away by invisible servants, flying like snowflakes, and passed back and forth between the judge's bench and the jury's bench. When the judge saw half of it, he turned to look at the defendant and sighed. The code of conduct was from a year ago, and the signature forms, inspection records, and surgical records were all started at least 2 months ago. The handwriting, arcane marks, and fingerprints are all different, the ink is different shades, and the dirty handprints left on the corners of the paper are all different colors. Even those poor mothers who cannot write their names at all still have fingerprints, medical records, and signatures from 2 or more people on the record book. Date, condition, each varies. What kind of precautions do you have to take to prevent people from causing trouble, so that the records can be so complete? Master Nordmark, you are also a legendary disciple after all, so you don't have to live in delusions of being harmed all day long, right? When all the record books came back in a circle, the way everyone present looked at Gretel was completely different from before. I was worried about my junior brother. Archmage Carlyle came over to see him and even gave him a thumbs up with a smile. Gretel has always been known to people as gentle, kind, easy to talk to, and even risking his own life when fighting for the rights of the poor. In short, he is a completely good and lawful character. You don't have to worry about him biting you at all. However, after seeing so many records, everyone realized that Greed had secretly been prepared. He doesn't cause trouble, and he's not afraid of trouble. If you want to provoke him, he can whip out a lot of evidence and slap you in the face at any time, making you have snot and tears. Gretel smiled slightly at his senior brother. He folded all the record books, raised his hand and pressed them, and suddenly felt peaceful and fulfilled. Oh, the emergency department warriors who have been tested for many years in medical troubles are so experienced. As for why I want to deliver babies to pregnant women. The purpose of Oak Grove Medical Clinic is to relieve patients' physical pain. I always feel that people's right to life is above all else. He nodded to the several witnesses and the female magicians in the gallery. There seemed to be something flashing in his field of vision. If he looked carefully, there was nothing unusual. Gretel blinked his eyes and turned to the opposite side of the dock without having time to take a closer look. It is much more important for mothers to have a safe delivery and avoid suffering pain than secular rules, such as women's bodies not being touched by strange men. Of course, considering women's thoughts, medical centers are also trying their best to train women to treat by. There was applause from the gallery. The seats where the female magicians gathered were shouting, with clear and high-pitched voices. Well said. That's how it is. You work so hard to give him a child, and you still care about this. It's shameless. Someone threw a handkerchief. Soon, the court was filled with incense, handkerchiefs, silk scarves, hair ties, folding fans. It fell like rain, spreading out into a colorful patch on the ground near Greet. Finally, they still had sense and didn't throw away their hairpins, rings, bracelets, and all kinds of jewelry. Gretel. We seem to be in a courtroom, not a theater. His face started to darken a little. The defendant's face was even darker than his. His hair was disheveled and his eyes were so red that they were almost bleeding. He stared at the colorful patch on the ground viciously for a while, and then stared at Greet. This must be your goal. Use this method to deceive women into favoring you. Once they stop doubting you, you can then choose whomever you want and do whatever you want. The court fell silent for a moment. The female magicians who were cheering just now were all red in the face and their teeth were chattering. However, these words swept them all in. Now speaking for Gretel, it felt like they were already compromising. Gretel was also stunned. Because these words were so shameless, for a while, I didn't know how to refute. You're talking nonsense. A female voice suddenly burst out from the auditorium. Everyone looked around and saw a silver figure running quickly, stepping on handkerchiefs and scarves all over the floor, and rushed straight to the plaintiff's seat. Gretel is not that kind of person. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's the end of the month, don't hold on to your monthly votes, vote for me, vote for me. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 631. Miss Yinlong is living a beautiful life during this time. Every morning, get up, go to the top of the mountain, unfold your true body, eat, and sleep, sleep until evening, get up, return to human form, go down the mountain, eat dinner, and sleep. When food comes, you can open your mouth, when money comes, you can stand up, and you are as happy as a god. The only thing needed is a button under the paw. If you feel something strange, press it. If you feel something strange again, press it again. However, such a happy day was disrupted this morning. Sirara stepped into the star dome, transformed into a dragon, and lay down. Not long after, she heard the magician on duty whispering in the corner of the hall. Why didn't Archmage Bradley come today? Cyrilla zzzzzzz. Oh, he has something to do at home, and he has to change shifts with someone. It seems that one of his relatives is going to file a lawsuit today, and someone is suing them. Cyrilla zzzzzzz. Who is it? Litigating with the Archmage's family. Cyrilla zzzzzzz. I forgot, I just listened to it and didn't pay attention. It seemed like it was from Mark. Cyrilla zzzzzzz. Nordmark. You can't even remember this name. Didn't you watch Arcana last month? Cyrilla, zzzzzzz. Nordmark. Are they talking about Gretel? Ah, when you said it, I remembered that he was right. So don't be afraid. Master Nordmark is the disciple of the Lord of Thunder. Cyrilla silently raised the tip of her tail. Shake left, shake right. Ahem, stop talking, you might find out. Miss Sarah, what are your orders? Oops. Found. However, if you are discovered, you can ask directly. Where will the lawsuit you mentioned be fought? When? I don't know. Ask. I want to know. Bang, Cyrilla slapped the floor with the tip of her tail, and gold coins flew everywhere. Miss Silver Dragon's request must be met immediately. After all, Miss Silver Dragon's scientific research ability is equivalent to half a large magic circle. Heck, even just the perception ability is enough for the astrology branch to add 2 extra people to run errands for the eldest lady. Anyway, since she came to work at the Star Dome, she has helped the great mages of the prophecy department verify a number of strange phenomena, and she has written several papers. Cyrilla signed every paper. Although the great magician who wrote the paper was very confused whether she should be placed as the second author or simply placed in the equipment column. But no matter what, the talkative mid-level mage immediately ran to ask. Not long after, the latest progress was brought. On the 18th floor of the Tower of Babel, the Grand Inquisition is about to begin. Oops. I'll go down and take a look. Miss Cyrilla. Miss Cyrilla. You still have work here. Miss Cyrilla. Cyrilla quietly slipped into the courtroom and found an inconspicuous seat to sit down. Greet didn't tell her, probably because he didn't want her to worry. Besides, her current job was introduced to her by Greet, and Greet wouldn't be happy to see her skipping work. I'll just listen. If it's okay, I'll sneak back quietly. Miss Yinlong huddled in the corner and listened. Listening to Greet's gushing, she was obviously well prepared, and she smiled softly. Her eyes sparkled when she heard Greet's sincere earnestness and compassion. Listening to the continuous applause nearby, the female magicians were throwing handkerchiefs and silk scarves like rain. She wrinkled her little nose and snorted in displeasure. Hearing that the old man refused to admit defeat and slandered him wantonly, she can't bear it anymore. Gretel is not that kind of person at all. If others don't know, she doesn't know. Cyrilla rushed down, stood next to Gretel, and shouted angrily. A few years ago, she might have passed away with a breath of dragon breath. However, it is Greet who is fighting the lawsuit now, and he has to win by defeating the other person. Therefore, she could only express her anger. Boom! With one punch, the table in front of Greet cracked and broke into several pieces on the spot. My medical records! Gretel screamed and hurriedly knelt down to clean up. Cyrilla turned her head and stuck out her tongue at him, then glared angrily at the other side. She struggled to lift Longway in her human form and charged toward the opposite side. Stare him to death, stare him to death, stare until he cries bitterly, kneels down, and begs for mercy. However, what she waited for first was not the defendant crying. After a moment of silence in the court, a whistle suddenly sounded from the auditorium. One after another. Whistles, applause, gentle laughter. The energy-shaping magicians, fearing that the world would be in chaos, clapped their hands, whistled, and made loud noises in their seats. The necromancers exercised their stiff facial muscles and pulled out ugly smiles. The unmarried and married female magicians of the enchantment and control system looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh softly. Even the clerk and jurors were laughing. A magician in the box on the left chuckled and shook his head. Ah, with such a lovely lady, I think our mage Nordmark will not do such despicable things. On the left and right sides, the male and female jurors all nodded and chuckled. Cyrilla's ears suddenly stood up. Brush, brush, turn twice, and aim straight in the direction of the speaker. Gretel is good. Greed is not this kind of person. Yes, yes, we know. The mage who spoke laughed as he spoke. At the end of his laugh, he took out his handkerchief and pressed the corners of his eyes carefully. Not to mention that the mage Nordmark has always had an excellent reputation, such a lovely lady, and she is so towards him, and has an incredible force value, the young man will not want to live any more if he continues to sneak around. Everyone in the courtroom, except the defendant, was smiling slightly. Even the judge did not scold Cyrilla for disrupting the order of the court. Instead, he picked up the teacup and sipped it slowly, looking at them with interest. Well, originally he was not a full-time judge. He was appointed by the parliament and took turns to serve. This morning's time is considered to be assigned to this case. Instead of enduring the torture of the old man, it is better to take a look at the young girl. Life has to have some fun, right? Gretel. Cyrilla, I know you are trying to protect me, and I am very grateful for your thoughtfulness. However, your appearance at this time always reminds me of something inappropriate. I have a clear conscience. I really didn't do anything bad. I am not the president of a certain country who is involved in a certain incident. I need the president's wife to come out and support me, saying that she believes in his character and the family will always be together to restore public support. Cyrilla, please sit aside first. I'll be fine. He squatted on the ground, stuffed the last medical record book back into the space bag, and raised his head to persuade Cyrilla. Don't worry, I can do it. If you continue to stand here, the judge will say that you are disturbing the court. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It's the end of the month, so hurry up and hand over your last monthly ticket. Don't hold it in your hand anymore.